Herzlich willkommen zu 99 zu 1. We're gonna have this in German. I didn't tell you.
With pleasure.
No. This is an English episode. I am here at the home of Ori Goldberg. Thanks, Ori, for having me.
My pleasure.
In Israel. I actually got to know you over a podcast. I think it was Parallax Views. Then I watched some stuff on Owen Jones. And I found you would be an interesting person to talk to. Then I found out that you're an Israeli scholar, ex-scholar, author, and political commentator. ChatGPT says renowned for his expertise in modern Iran and Shia revolutionary movements.
ChatGPT
and the interplay between religion and politics in the Middle East. I actually checked out your I think I found a lecture of yours, a short one on Iran that was also very interesting. Maybe another topic we can get back to. But what I wanted to talk to you about today is obviously the war, what's been happening the last 1.5 years here in Israel. But before that, is there anything else you want to say towards you as a person? Is there anything noteworthy that I missed?
Not really. I will say that for most of my life, I was an Israeli academic. I have a PhD in Middle Eastern history with a specialty in Iran. I'm an ideas man, ideas and thoughts. So I wrote about religion and politics and Iran's Islamic Revolution, and I was moving towards a tenured position and being a professor, but I don't think I'm cut out for the academic life. I mean, that's what I did. Again, I'll be 50 in November. I don't think that's the life for me. I don't know what the life for me is yet, but the past 1.5 years has brought out an activist in me that I didn't know was there. And I am taking it day by day, seeing where it goes, because there's really no telling where this situation is going to be.
So, the fact that you're now basically out of academia, is this related to the current situation? And
it is to some extent. It was a mixture of things, mostly an all fronts all fronts midlife crisis. For me, and also the realization that despite having seen myself as an academic for the rest of my life, I wasn't really a great academic. But it was also politics, a place where I taught, like most Israeli universities, doesn't appreciate constant and critical political expression. And I was never officially constrained, but I was warned and frowned upon, and let's say that had I not been engaged in ongoing political speech, I may not have found myself leaving.
Right.
But all in all, it's a good thing. The only thing I miss is teaching. I really like teaching. I don't necessarily like scholarship.
Right. I was wondering, because when I heard you speak, you have some pretty, I would say, for Israeli public opinion, you have some pretty radical viewpoints.
I do.
Just for example, I mean, one example is even the most critical Israelis that we sometimes also read in Germany. I don't know, somebody that would pop up in Haaretz, like Gideon Levy, for example, someone like that. They would not use the word genocide, which you use regarding what's happening in Gaza a lot.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we can discuss this in a bit, but I was wondering, how is it that you don't see yourself? And I believe that people like Levy, or maybe other people that would like to speak in that way don't, because they would be scared for repression. How is it that you are not facing any such things, and you can be pretty open about this stuff?
Well, first of all, there aren't a whole lot of people like that. You say people pop up in Haaretz, like Gideon Levy may be the only one who pops up in Haaretz. Haaretz is a left-wing newspaper in Israel that it is, let's say, on the right of any decent European social democratic movement. It took me a while to get to genocide. I spent the first few months of this conflict not saying genocide, and I came to the decision to use it when I thought that it turned into genocide. And before I get into the personal stuff, which I think is more interesting, I mean, legally speaking, the discussion among scholars of genocide right now is almost exclusively about Israel, and they seem to be almost unanimous in thinking that definition of genocide is going to change because of what is happening in Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
Definition that was coined in 1948 was specifically tailor-made for the Nazis, and it required intent proved in an orderly way, documented with government orders and so on. And that things have changed. And so far, they only changed outside the quote-unquote civilized world in places like Rwanda. But this is the first genocide to take place or to be perpetrated by a supposedly Western country, member of the global north. So the way Israel is doing things is most likely going to change the definition of genocide. And as for being subject to criticism in Israel, the weird thing is because I am open and free in saying these things, I'm actually not subjected to so much criticism, at least not from the general public opinion, because I am just saying these things. And the most radical thing I say is likely not that Israel is carrying out genocide, but it's as good an example as any. Saying these things is so far-fetched in current mainstream Israeli discourse that very few people care. You know, people like me, we are a very small minority. We're not considered an actual threat to the well-being of Israel. We're just considered crazy or bleeding hearts or
anarchist pensioners, I think he called.
Yeah, but
Netanyahu with these soldier guys, for example.
Right, but when you say anarchists, it's usually fighting words. It's like these people are, you know, a threat to the legals. But Israel is in such disarray at the moment. It is on the verge of being a failing state. Not a failed state yet, but on the verge of being a failing state. That people like me who talk about human rights, or the universal principles, and even just clean strategy are so out there. We're just not a part of the discourse. So I'm actually not being constrained in any way or limited in any way. And it's not like I'm receiving daily death threats. It's not very dangerous being in my position. I think I'm annoying quite a few people, but other than getting them annoyed, I don't think that I've necessarily done much. And to be quite frank, I'm not speaking out in the strict sense of politics. I'm not trying to persuade anybody. I don't think my words are persuading Israel. Because Israelis at the moment don't have the capacity to hear and certainly not to change their minds. And that's okay. The reason I'm speaking is because Israeli discourse is so one-dimensional and has been for a year and a half that it's just important to put the words out there. It's important for there to be two things. One is a statement of principles by Israelis who don't agree with what Israel is doing, just to make it clear that you can be Israeli and not agree. And the second is, I think, a description of the experience of living here in a society that does these things, that psychs itself up, that alters its mental state intentionally to let it do these things. It's a human lesson, one that I hope will be learned, will be observed and learned, so the international community can prevent such things from happening in the future. And that's another reason I think it's important for me to speak, but I'm not doing it as part of a political campaign or to under the illusion that my positions are in any way affected in Israel.
Right. I mean, that's also what I wanted to talk to you about. I actually was here on October 7th, 1.5 years ago. Had to left a couple of days later. And this is the first time I'm back. And I mean, we've been coming here multiple times a year for 10 years in a row or something like this, as my family's here. This was now the first time today. My trip here was the first time being actually with Israelis, as we are in this Arab town in the north, right? Since I'm here now. And it struck me that while everything around me kind of seems normal, just like I'm used to the years before, I'm not. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. Also, you like to think that Israel shouldn't be normal because nothing is normal.
so that's what I was wondering, if I just can't see it, and everybody else has this stuff on their mind too, or it's just not on their mind and they don't, like, life just goes on. That's what I would like you to elaborate. Like, what did this do to Israeli society? How are they dealing with this? What are they telling themselves and others about what's going on?
Sure, I think that's a good question. As far as I'm concerned, it's like my $64,000 question, because it's obvious what it's done to Palestinian society, both in the occupied territories and in Gaza and in Israel. As for Israelis, to elaborate what you just said, it's true, there is this illusion of normalcy, which is freaky in itself because the country is officially at war. So what normalcy is there? It's had a strange effect on the Israeli public consciousness, public sphere, public discourse, I know what you want to call it. I think that the most straightforward way of talking about it is to say that what October 7th did in many ways is take as the Americans say, the quiet parts and say them out loud. Because for decades we had indoctrinated ourselves into believing that we've got this Palestinian thing under control. The ones who are occupied and they know their place, and we're on the verge of signing the normalization deal with Saudi Arabia and being integrated into that part of the Middle East, whereas the other parts of the Middle East were, failing, to say the least. We wanted to be friends with the Gulf monarchies because they were our kind of Arabs. Mostly they were far away and had no demands of us. And we thought that would shut the Palestinians up for good, because now we've got real authorization from real Arabs that nobody cares about Palestinians. We really believed that was true, and if it meant fighting occasional small land wars in Gaza or taking the occasional 1,000 rockets or whatever, okay. That's okay, as long as we normalized our existence by doing this. But the occupation was not an anomaly. None of that was true, of course.
It's kind of like the whole society, even before that, I mean, you could tell that the whole society formed around this thing where there is somehow constant peril. And, you see soldiers in the train stations with their M16s on your lap and stuff like that, where they're always ready, but they're in control. So
yeah,
and that's okay like this, and it can stay like this.
The control part is the important part, because for the first 25 years of Israel's existence, it was about existential war. Right now, we fought wars that, had we not won, would have annihilated us. And it doesn't matter who started them. That's for a different historical discussion. But they were existential wars against states.
Right.
And ever since 1973, which was the last existential war, Israel has been first choosing its wars. That's the tune of the 3 invasions of Lebanon, for example. But also it has invested most of its efforts in the occupation of Palestinian territories. And in many ways, the occupation and in the ensuing settlements and the entire apartheid structure is probably the state of Israel's greatest act of state, as it's called in legal speak. That's what we did. And the whole thing was carried out outside the confines of normal Israel. Right? We never annexed the West Bank or Gaza, but we could have, or at least we could have tried to, but we knew that it would not be approved, so we did. So they exist in a kind of a limbo. So what you've got is the Middle East's only democracy, right? As we like to call ourselves for Jews, of course. Devoting most of its efforts and resources to the maintenance of the opposite of democracy, towards the maintenance of the military dictatorship and the dictators. And we thought, or we had grown to think, that was normal. And sustainable, normal, even desirable, because, the Palestinians, of course, they want to kill us, but we'll keep them in their place. But we didn't talk about it much. We were striving towards normalcy, which is where you don't have to explain who you are and what you are. You just are. And we thought we were on the way there. And October 7th flipped that entire equation on us. We were no longer able to lie to ourselves. We were no longer able to pretend that we don't see the Palestinians anymore, because we managed to stick them under a rock persuasively enough so they won't come out. They came out, and leave aside the gruesome aspects of Hamas massacre on October 7th, because there were certain crimes against humanity and war crimes perpetrated them. They defeated Israel militarily. They took 3 heavily fortified Israeli military bases. And this wasn't terrorism. This was a war. This was a military raid. They won, decisively won. They took hostages. This whole preoccupation with the monstrosity of the whole affair is a way of denying that reality,
Diverting the attention.
Yeah. And what it means is that we can no longer pretend. We can no longer pretend that our state, which is based on segregation, on apartheid, and based on Jewish supremacy, on the notion this is a Jewish state, Jews are worth more, Jewish blood is worth more. So we can no longer keep that quiet. Now we're saying it out loud. And that was a major break, psychotic break for us, sort of, because, imagine that. Imagine having your secret fantasies suddenly being pushed up to the forefront and being spoken aloud. Imagine having your superego and your id change places. That was what happened to us, basically.
So what were these fantasies?
That the Palestinians would be gone, not dead. We didn't feel a need to exterminate them physically. It wasn't about them dying. It was about them not being here and not having a claim to this space. I remember these conversations from when I was a teenager, and they were here before me then. Questions like, if you had a big red button you could press and Palestinians would be gone the next day. That's that, right? Yeah, because it's a good example. Everybody said yes, of course.
Yeah, here Golan had an interview in a German newspaper not long ago, and he said exactly the same thing. But he had a realistic spin to it, and he was like, "Yeah, of course we wish they weren't here, but they are here, and we can't get rid of them. So we gotta, keep our security architecture and keep them down."
Yes. And another disclaimer would be to say, but of course, the Palestinians felt the same way, right?
Right. Yes.
Right. Sure. Yeah, that was, that's the fantasy. The fantasy is that they won't be here. And it's not because of a desire to fulfill biblical prophecies. There are Israelis who have that desire. They're not a majority. It's because the Palestinians are barring our way to complete normalcy. Part of the great radical innovation of Israeli Jewishness is that we are no longer an anomaly. We're no longer the stranger. We're no longer the freak. We are who we are. This is who we are. We are a people tied to a piece of land. We are a nation state. That's what we deserve. And the Palestinians are a thorn in our side. So the fantasy is that the Palestinians won't be here. But we've never, yes, there are settlers. True, definitely. And the settlers have most likely already spoiled the two-state option. Mm-hmm. I don't know if the two-state option is practical. Mm-hmm. But most Israelis would never have thought of any kind of practical action that might make the fantasy come true. Mm-hmm. It was a fantasy, right? The sort of fantasy that in a long-term relationship you may keep under wraps because you're a little embarrassed to admit. So we made do with the occupation. We thought that the occupation, its oppressive reality, was, just cost of doing business, as the Americans say.
What kept them before October 7th from wanting to realize that fantasy? What was like?
What is?
Yeah. So, like, I mean,
with self-delusion, the sense that we are on the verge. I mean, there was the whole Saudi Arabian angle. We're not going to pretend like the Arabs like us, but we're going to normalize relations. And we're going to be closing deals. They're going to be coupon, opportunities for Israelis to capitalize on. And they don't have to like us. The whole peace with Egypt's narrative, peace with Jordan narrative coming together. That's never materialized. There was never real peace. But, it's good enough for us. We don't want to be Arab anyway. We're European. I mean, after all, we did win the Eurovision Song Contest, right? 3 or 4 teams that we do play in, in UEFA, Eurocup now, yeah. And we won the European Basketball Championships. We're European, dude. We're not Arabs. We'll normalize our relations with the local savages. And, we'll get what we need from them. And that'll be that. We don't. And it seemed like, for people who are really profoundly deluding themselves, which is the majority of the population here, it seemed like that's the way it was going. And it had all the features of every colonial enterprise you can think of, except that the colonies were right there. And the left here was a willing participant in the game, because the left said, it's better for us to be on the inside. We want to influence what's happening. We want to be a part of it. But the entire society is based on supremacy and segregation. So that whole thing exploded on October 7th. But it exploded in a way that, again, brought the fantasy up. That changed places between the id and the superego. So now it's considered perfectly legitimate to talk about the eradication, the liquidation of Gaza or whatever. And then with complete honesty, as far as the Israeli U.S. is concerned, to say, I'm not talking about genocide. Of course, I'm not perpetrating.
That would be my next question, because this is also something you really noticed, that not only politicians, but I've seen like segments from Israeli television where there, things said openly that are like really about, just eradicating like a whole people. And it's not even like in that practical aspect where they speak about, displacing them or sending them to Somaliland or whatever. It's really about, no, we have to eradicate them. And that's like an openly accepted position. At the same time, if somebody comes and says, but you're perpetrating genocide that way, they are all upset. How does this fit together? How does it work?
First of all, there's another aspect of our existence. It's not just supremacy of the Palestinians. It's also our singularity. We are a singularity. All we want to be is normal, but we never want you to forget that we are also a singularity. And that the entire world owes us.
As victims of the Holocaust.
Yes. Yeah. And victims of persecution. And
right.
Because there is everything. But yeah, and the fact that we are still here, that we are an ancient people, and we're still living our story, and we've come back to our land despite the persecution and all that. That you people owe us, and you should deliver. And we're unique. What we're allowed, nobody else is allowed. Okay, so of course we're not perpetrating genocide, because there was this argument that always left me speechless when I heard it. It's still being used. It was, had we actually wanted to kill them all, we would have already killed them all.
Yeah, I heard that too. We have nuclear weapons. We could have just nuked them all or something.
We could have just, bombed the shit out of them anyway, which we did, of course.
Yeah.
There's this discourse of, it's like communism. It's like, how in the 30s and 40s, supporters of communism all over the world said true communism has yet to be attempted.
Right.
So Israelis will say the same thing about true power with regard to Gaza. The next stage, no holds barred. Right. Like what's happening to Gaza is the result of restraint.
Mm-hmm.
we held ourselves back. So it's a combination of those things. But again, the uniqueness. I don't think most Israelis, let's say of my generation, really, felt we were unique or felt uniquely persecuted. What we wanted was to sit in.
Mm-hmm.
But we were always taught that was the case, that was the fate of the Jewish people, that was what happened. And we always pushed it down. But then it came up. October 7th, everything that we had pushed down had come up. It suddenly surfaced. We thought we could close our eyes and wish the Palestinians away. But October 7th engraved the Palestinians on our retinas. We couldn't unsee them. They were always there. And you look at Gaza, Israelis still talk about an existential threat from Gaza, but of course there's no existential threat from Gaza. What can they do? But we think that we have the right, the prerogative, to destroy whoever might have the intent to do it, which is, frankly, delusional. I think of it, I've written about it as solipsism, this homicidal solipsism. And solipsism is the philosophical stance that basically says, I am the only real entity in this world. Everything else is a sham or a production mounted for my benefit or whatever. And that's kind of how we treat the Palestinians. Again, most Israelis ask them if what they want is to kill Palestinians, and they will say, of course not. That's something a lot of people that talk to me on Twitter don't understand, and I don't blame them. It's difficult to get. Israelis say, of course not. Of course we don't want to kill Palestinians. But is it our fault that Hamas uses them as human shields? Is it our fault that they're in the way? Is it our fault that they won't leave? Is it our fault that they chose Hamas? No.
Yeah, the agency for that is basically put completely on the existence of the people there.
Palestinians have no agency. Right. They are capable either of being demons, and that means being active Hamas supporters, or they're just not really there. As demons, they are also two-dimensional, at most, but only we are three-dimensional. Only we understand the complexity. You've heard a lot about the complexity of the situation.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
There's nothing complex about it.
No. But at the same time, actually, kind of putting one's own agency, let's say the Israeli agency, into I don't know the field of the Palestinians, the field of of Hamas, basically saying that we can't commit genocide because actually, it's really like a perversion that says that Hamas is committing the genocide in Gaza right now.
Oh, of course. And then people said that much. People said that's what they wanted. They set out they wanted to commit genocide on Israeli Jews. That's what they wanted.
No, even on the Palestinians.
Oh, yeah, sure.
It's them that all the arguments are all about them doing that, right?
Their fault. It's all their responsibility. Every single death that has taken place in Gaza, including what we might admit to as mistakes, is all Hamas. We are not responsible. Yeah.
So, because in Germany, there might be this perception sometimes that Israelis are behind Netanyahu's right-wing government. That's German way to talk about the government. They are behind it because they don't know what's happening in Gaza.
Yeah.
Do people here know what's happening in Gaza?
Yeah.
They have social media, right? Instagram and stuff like this.
Yeah. It takes a great effort to pretend that you don't. You might have. But again, it was. Let me be as charitable as I can. Okay, maybe for the first 2 or 3 months they didn't know. Although that's impossible because the bombings were so severe. It was impossible.
Especially the first 3 months then.
Yeah, it was impossible not to understand what was happening. And I can say this with a very clear conscience because I wrote my first post calling for Israel not to bomb Gaza. It was either the evening of October 7th or the morning of October 8th. It was very obvious. Just as it is obvious that you don't solve a crime with another crime. But let's say it took Israelis 3 months to come to their senses. When the ground invasion began, and 300,000 Israelis, 200,000, 250,000, whatever, moved into Gaza, Everybody knew everything. You have to really work very hard to make that excuse stick, and you won't be able to do it. Everybody knew everything, and again, I won't say that everybody actively supported it, but everybody enabled it. Because what most people said was, yes, it's gruesome, yes, it's horrible, but what do you propose that we do? And please be practical. Don't give me any of your bleeding heart nonsense.
Right.
Stop it. This is something that you heard then and you will hear now. This has been the most justified war Israel has ever fought. Now, a lot of Israelis are saying it's not justified anymore. It's political. You have to stop it. But for a year and a half, and still, I think most Israelis think this is the most justified war Israel has ever fought, and that there is no expiration date on Israel's permission, justification, authority, call it what you will, to do whatever the hell it wants to Palestinians. And in the West Bank, there's no difference. And of course in Israel too, but that takes different form. So no expiration date. They are always to blame. We are always the victims. Again, like I said, the quiet part's being said out loud. We didn't like to show off our Holocaust joker, right? This was something that was understood between friends. You owe us. Why? Because you owe us, But now we're saying it outright. Another phrase that you will hear often is that October 7th was the worst massacre perpetrated upon the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Right? Because everything's compared to the Holocaust. It's completely ahistorical. It fits perfectly into a framework where it doesn't matter what the Jews do. Everybody wants to kill them anyway.
Yeah, it's a comparison by which it's actually put in continuation with the Holocaust.
As a continuation, you say that's a good word because it emphasizes how ridiculously paradoxical this is. It's not really a continuation because it never moves. It's always the same.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't grow or develop. It's always the same. There's always, and that I think relates to the way Israel and the United States and American Jews responded to the demonstrations on university campuses in America.
Mm-hmm.
Right? These are just Stammies, and they're crazy anti-Semites, and they want to kill all the Jews. Mm-hmm. Now look, there's anti-Semitism out there. There is. I know it. And it also comes from good people. I get a lot of responses on Twitter that say, it was like, well, that's Jews for you. Right? Yeah. And, okay. I mean, I know where they're coming from, and I could tell they're anti-Semites, but the notion that the huge wave of anti-Semitism sweeping the world and that it is completely unrelated to Israel's actions is ridiculous. And probably more than anything, the most ridiculous aspect of being Israeli, and that has an effect on society at all levels you would think of, is that basically what Israel is saying is Israel is denying that actions have consequences. We are saying that our actions don't have consequences.
They're just responses, basically.
And imagine what that does to the social fabric of things. I mean, I'll just share this crazy anecdote with you. Okay? I've been monitoring this for a few months. Israelis, not everybody, but the great majority, don't use car signals. When they turn, when they go into your traffic
sensor, notice that.
They don't use car signals. You know what that means? That means that every Israeli's attitude towards society in general is fuck you,
get out of the way.
No, not even get out of the way. I'm not even seeing.
No, okay.
Now, why is the difference important? Why is it important that it's not get out of the way? I'm not even seeing, because we're not even seeing the Palestinians. They're not there, and that infiltrates into the deep fabric of society. It always does. You start off not seeing Palestinians, you end up by not seeing.
By not seeing, you mean they're not even, their position is not even considered to be one of adversaries.
Yeah, they're just not there.
Yeah, they're just not there.
They're not there. That is what most Israelis feel when it comes to what we call collateral damage among Palestinians. Yes, I mean, I guess in some abstract way we're sorry, but they're not reading people. So they're not, okay. I mean, in a way, showing the images day of hoping that will bring about some kind of change it doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Not that I'm opposed to it. I feel like Palestinians have every right to do whatever the hell they want. They can talk about anything they want. They can push anything they want. But Israelis are not with that.
Yeah, it's not about showing them more images on Instagram for sure. Right. So how about their self-image though? I mean, one of the things that you also started noticing in this war or in this operation in Gaza is it's not only the victims, but it's also the glee and the appreciation of the violence by so many soldiers that posted all this crap on TikTok. I mean, it was really like remarkable how many of these posts were going around the world. So how would Israelis stand to this? Like, is that something they disapprove of? Is that something?
Tell you that these people they've been fighting for who knows how many months.
I have understanding for them.
Some of them are just boys who look like boys. Some of them are just, releasing some steam. And what are you going to do? It's never their fault. If it's anybody's fault, it's leadership's fault. But they're crazy right-wingers, or they're not. But no Israeli will ever come out and say, you people should be convicted of war crimes. I guess the reason is not so far-fetched. It has to do with the fact that, at least initially, there were hundreds of thousands of Israelis there. So effectively, everybody knew
somebody there
who's in there. So what are you going to do? Are you going to call out the person that you say you're a war criminal? And you got a lot of Israelis who will say, but we were there, so we know no war crimes were committed, and we're the most moral military force in the world. And again, it's not, you don't gain much by pointing a finger at a specific person who did a specific thing. You do, but you don't. That's not the point.
Right.
The point is that you had directions coming from brigadier general or general level saying, draw an imaginary line. Anybody who crosses that line dies. That's how the Israeli military killed 3 of the hostages. They'd escaped. It got to a really, really horrible level where one of them was very pale-skinned, red-haired, and freckled. And he stood and spoke to the Hebrew. He stood and spoke to the group of soldiers who had their guns pointed at him for 15 minutes. And he managed to convince them that he was a hostage. But there was a sniper sitting a few hundred meters back. And he had received his orders through some other channel. So he shot him in the head and he died.
Well,
yeah. So, of course, we're not going to accuse the soldiers. Was it their fault? Was it the sniper's fault? Well, of course it wasn't. And in a way, you know what? That's not totally wrong, because as this year and a half proves, this is a social thing. This is an entire society. It's not some crazies who, I don't know, the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans who...
In Amsterdam.
Yeah, went crazy in Amsterdam. They could be arrested or not or whatever. This is hundreds of thousands of people that keep rotating in and out of Gaza. And this is an entire country, and you look at what's been happening for the past 7 weeks. It's obvious that some sort of deal is being negotiated. But Israel is using the time to just continue the annihilation, destroying Rafah, maybe destroying Gaza City, or dumping, killing dozens and dozens every night, bombing hospitals, bombing tech calls. For what? To kill the deputy governor of Bethlehem on behalf of Hamas or whatever. But that's what we're doing. And again, ask the military people and they will tell you, but no, we've got targets. We know what we're doing. We're hitting Hamas. We're going to destroy it or whatever. But it continues. Which is why I think ultimately there will be no choice but to change the parameters that define genocide. Because it's true, Israel's genocide is certainly not like Germany's in the Second World War. It's not like the Hutu genocide in Rwanda. And it's not even like the Serb genocide in Bosnia. It's different, but it is. systemic, and it is part of an attempt to make the Palestinians stop existing.
So let's talk about this for a second. So why is it genocide for you? Why don't you just say, okay, they are, that's at least their reasoning, and they have their targets, and this guy, I don't know, this clerk from Hamas is a political party in Gaza. So there are, of course, hundreds of thousands of people that are connected somehow to Hamas. Yeah, exactly. So all of them potential targets.
Yeah.
Still, they're fighting Hamas. So how did you, or before you said, maybe let's put it that way, before you said you were hesitating using the genocide word in the first couple months.
I'm a product of Israeli indoctrination as well.
How did that change for you? When did you realize that it's something?
When enough time passed and nothing changed, and it only got worse. I think that when enough time passes, you cannot deny the systemic nature of being done. And also, I got a better understanding of how the Israeli system works. It's like there's a paradox at work here. It's almost like there's intentional negligence. What I mean by that, it's like you get a very broad instruction or order, and you're told to make sure it happens. How? You're not given specific info. So it's destruction through neglect as well. And I think, and the more the evidence piled up, this is what Israel was doing. The more it became clear that Hamas targets were produced algorithmically, or that they were bombed, they were home with their family. So you couldn't make the excuse you were defending civilians. But it became clear that Israel was lifting any and all defenses, usually known in international humanitarian law, from civilians. As the evidence piled up, and what the evidence said was not there's an official government order. There's like a FATSE convention and the final solution. No. But it became clear that this is what Israel is trying to do. Maybe to return the hostages, maybe to keep Netanyahu in power, maybe to settle in Gaza, although I doubt that the most. But it doesn't matter. What matters is the Palestinians are dying. Dozens and dozens are dying every day. And they're dying every day because of Israeli policy that while it does not stem from an original order given to the military, after a year and a half, after a year, after 6 months, who can deny the fact that it is being perpetrated systemic fashion? So I became convinced.
So, I mean, normally the term genocide, it would need them to want to destroy or get rid of whole people.
No,
because of they are.
It's not a matter of quantity. It's a matter.
Yeah, exactly. It can be a part of that people too, right? But they need to be targeted for being that people.
Exactly. The intention is to make that people stop existing, stop being, and
that's also why genocide can be a tool of ethnic cleansing, also, like to get rid of them from a certain territory.
Yes. But also there are other ways of getting Israel. To be quite frank, I don't really think it matters. I don't think it matters if Israel is brought up on charges of eradication or genocide.
No, of course not.
Or whatever. I think Israel is committing crimes against humanity. I understand the importance of using genocide, which is also why I use it. One reason is to stick it to those Israelis who choose not to take part, who choose to stay silent and are therefore enablers. But it's also because I find it, and I have friends on the Israeli left who get upset with me for doing this or saying this, but I think of myself as very, very much Jewish and Israeli. And it really shocks me and saddens me and angers me that I find myself doing this. I mean, when the last recording of that paramedic who you just executed in my surface, on the one of the 15, the last words he said were, "The Jews are coming, the Jews are coming." I find that very hard to live with. The fact that we are now the ones who are dreaded. We are the monsters. Maybe we always were, but it was never this extreme. And I realized fairly early on, but the realization has been driven home over the past 2 months, that there is no real debate. That if there was a debate, then I would have to participate in a debate defined as genocide, yes or no.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to participate in that debate. And I don't feel a need to work from the inside and convince people, because in Israel, what that means for somebody who thinks the way I think is to constantly be taking a step back, to constantly be accommodated, be willing to acknowledge the validity of a viewpoint that, well, yes, this is not legitimate, but that is. No, I don't think any of it is legitimate. And I thought it was illegitimate from October 8th onward. So, I mean, I realize things change. I want to stay here. I mean, I think I'm in a position where if I wanted to find a job abroad, then I could probably find one. Mm-hmm. Perhaps even an academic position, because I've got academic credentials, I've written books. And also I've got a following that is large enough to connect, but I don't want to. I live here. Hebrew is my language, and my family is here, my life is here, and I will be chased out if my life or the life of my loved ones is in danger. But before that happens, I'm here for the duration. So if I'm here, I want to be very clear, very direct about saying what I need, hopefully doing what I say. I don't for a second entertain the illusion that I am shaping future Israeli politics. But I think things will change. And I think that when they change, the fact that I and people like me have taken the trouble to articulate a political position, a political vision, that's there in Hebrew, that can be embraced, that can be fulfilled, I think that will be important. Maybe it won't happen during my lifetime. It may not. There's the option of that, but I don't feel like I have a chance.
Yep. So I have basically 2 or 3 more fields that I want to go into. The first would be maybe coming to the international reaction and also what that did to the consciousness of people here in Israel. So, I mean, fairly soon after they started this carpet bombing campaign in October 2023, I think it took until January or so for the UN to actually come out. I think South Africa came out with the first lawsuit saying that Israel's perpetrating genocide there. And then, you have the lawsuits against Gallant and against Netanyahu, and you have Francesca Albanese touring the world, and
I love her.
She was on our channel too, by the way.
I don't know. I heard about her visit to Japan. We correspond occasionally.
Cool. So basically touring the world and spreading that message too. So I wonder how do people in Israel see this? Is this just another proof for them that the world is against them?
Yes. That's what happens when you experience a psychotic break. And when you turn solipsistic, because the world doesn't exist either. There's this world of which we speak. What it means effectively is that we have to adopt certain measures if we go abroad. I try not to speak Hebrew, try not to get to political arguments, but that's okay because we're used to the world hating us. We've grown up thinking that the world hates us. The world doesn't understand how complex the situation is, because for the world, this is theoretical. This is a discussion that takes place in some woke silo. They don't understand the reality. And so what will we do? Will we argue with the world? We're not going to argue with the world. We'll just try and play the world for a fool. Try and get the world to do whatever we want it to do. And if we don't, then, it's just like the Trump administration defined the court order to return that poor man who had been sent to El Salvador. Even the Trump administration admitted that it was a mistake. But they said, no, we can't get him back. The court ordered them to get him back. They said, sorry, we can't. That's kind of what's happening here. You really want to tell us to stop? But okay, go ahead and tell us that this may be stop. So, and we will continue to go abroad as much as we can.
Because at the same time, they want to be part of that world, right?
We do, but we understand the reality. And the reality is that people don't like us.
Right.
And we have to take care of ourselves. People don't understand the situation in which we find ourselves. And if they don't understand, it's their problem. We'll go abroad. We'll continue to do whatever we do. Israelis don't understand what's going to happen. What's already happening, but what will happen. Israelis don't understand that people will spit in their coffee. And they don't, things like an academic boycott, which is raging, by the way. Israelis are being compartmentalized left and right. They're left out of grant applications. They're not receiving funding. And it's true about foreign investment here as well. Israelis still don't understand. Most Israelis don't feel the effect immediately, but they will. And I don't know if that would be enough to change their minds, though, because right now it's only getting stronger. The siege mentality, the idea that everybody's against us, and we have to make sure that we take care of ourselves because nobody's going to do that for us. So screw the world. I don't know if you heard about Yair Netanyahu responding to
Macron,
with
screw you, yeah.
Screw you, fee. Yeah, and his father said as much. Said, I don't like the style in which my son spoke. He's a true Zionist.
He's right. Yeah.
He said he's a true Zionist, and in many ways, being a true Zionist now means saying, screw you.
Mm-hmm. So what about all these protests? You already mentioned them. Ultimately, there are people now protesting the war. So, and by the way, in Germany, in German media, this will also be depicted as, yeah, look, that's another proof of the democracy being well and alive, and people actually are, against the war crimes being committed.
Yeah, except they're not. What they're against is Netanyahu, or Netanyahu's government.
Why is that? Can you explain a little bit? You don't have to.
And they're not even against Netanyahu's government. They don't like Netanyahu, and this has to do with. Well, it's a little complex.
Yeah. We don't have to open the full box.
It's okay. I'm not going to go into a full historical note, but it's complex because it holds contrasting forces. On the one hand, the struggle against Netanyahu is a struggle of the old elite against the new elite. Netanyahu represents the upstarts, the people who should not be governing anyway. Be they Jews of Middle Eastern extraction or right-wingers, people who are not part of the socialist elite, the founding fathers, but also an elite that's growing more and more right-wing and illiberal as we speak, more religious, more oppressive. So people are protesting against that, which is not a bad thing to protest against, except what it also does is it sustains the solipsism. It sustains the sense that all we're doing is that all we care about is ourselves. Okay? Because the thing is, for more than a year, nobody calls for an end to war. People said, make a deal and bring the hostages home.
Right.
And even now, it seems like a fine nuance, but it's not really. Most of the letters sent calling for an end to something, we're not calling for an end to the war, we're saying we're calling for an end to the fighting, which means get a ceasefire,
right? Make
a deal, bring the hostages back home, and then decide how to destroy Hamas.
So they don't care what happens after, really?
Not really, no. Read the letters and you'll see that there's one word that's completely missing from them. And that is the word Palestinians. Nobody's calling for an end to the war because of what he does to the Palestinians. They're calling for an end to the war because of the damage it inflicts on Israeli society. So these people are protesting against what is likely the worst government Israel has ever had. Not because it's right-wing or fascist, but really because it hasn't been governing, because it has let Israel slip, because they don't care about governing. Because Netanyahu is a consummate politician, but he's also a madman at the moment. So you can't fault them for protesting, but you should fault them, and I try to, for not, when they don't call for an end to the war, when they don't care about Palestinians, when they say, stop deciding long enough to make a deal and then go back. What they're actually doing is supporting Netanyahu's policies. What they're saying is this war is maybe the only way we can get rid of Hamas, but we just have to conduct it the right way. The problem is that Netanyahu is really bad at running wars. We'll get a former general in the chair and they'll manage the war for us and all will be well. So that's the rub. That's the difficult thing here, is that they are protesting, but they're not protesting to end the war. They're certainly not protesting to end the genocide. And they don't care about the Palestinians. As far as most of them are concerned, raining hellfire in Gaza for 1.5 years is not a bad thing.
As long as the hostages are out.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's all we care about.
Right.
So there's some letters mention innocence in Gaza. But even then, it's like Israel is causing disproportionate damage to the innocents in Gaza. This isn't disproportionate damage. This is genocide. We've destroyed Gaza. So the protests are not against the war crimes. Maybe you could actually put it as simply as that. Protests are not against the war crimes. Nobody almost is out in the street protesting the war crimes. Protests are against Netanyahu and Netanyahu's government. But in not protesting the war crimes, perpetrating this genocide is the biggest thing the Netanyahu government has done. So let's say you oppose every smaller thing the Netanyahu government has done, but you don't oppose the biggest thing it's done. What I'm suggesting is that the overall effect is that you are, in fact, validating and justifying Netanyahu's government.
But what I understand from you is also that's because they are actually okay with it.
Yes, that's true.
So it's not just a tactical or a messaging error. No, they are.
No, it's not. The general consensus that's still holding up Israeli society at the moment. The one place where everybody agrees.
Let's take a break.
The one place where everybody agrees is that we should kill them. Or not kill them, we shouldn't kill them, but we need to get rid of this problem.
Right, get rid of the problem. Finish it. Yeah.
We need to do whatever it takes.
Right.
And if you have another solution, go ahead and propose it and make sure it's practical and it rids us of this problem. Or if you don't have another solution, what other solution could you offer? Could you say have a reduced genocide? Take it down by 50%? Again, you're back to the discussion, genocide, yes or no. Assuming you don't want to be in that discussion, you don't have a discussion. And it's true, most Israelis don't want a discussion. They want to think that they're free to do whatever they feel they need to do, which, by the way, also explains our policies in Lebanon and Syria.
Sure.
We've taken a piece of land. We're not progressive. We're not going to invade Syria, God forbid. Do we want to fight Russia? Do we want to fight Turkey? We don't. But what we want is the knowledge that should we decide to bomb Kurds in Damascus, we can do that with impunity. That's the prize we're fighting for. We're fighting for impunity. We're fighting for our specialness. Remember that we are special. No matter what we do, we can get away with it. And that unites pretty much all Israelis.
What about these guys? I mean, I saw a couple of guys. I mean, maybe in the video, I saw like 6 or 7, so I don't know how big they are. But there are actually a couple of guys protesting in the streets against the genocide in Gaza. It's like,
yes, there are people who are protesting. There is still a left in Israel. And there are still some groups that are organized and protesting the war. We are, I would assume, let's say I'm being remarkably generous. And I'll say that among the Jewish public, there are 10,000 people who think like me. Some of them protest. Some of them don't dare to speak. A lot of people are afraid. And some, like me, write on social media or do whatever. But we're not more than 10,000 people.
And are these guys, for example, like demonstrate in the street? Is it like an accepted position? Are they
No.
antagonized? Are they?
The police beat them severely.
Yeah.
They're not forbidden to protest, but again, they kind of are because, I mean, I just read today that young Israeli teenagers who want to serve in the Air Force are asked by people who are interviewing them for different positions is they participate in weekly demonstrations against the government.
I see. So career paths are being closed, basically.
But again, this it looks like when you participate in demonstrations against the government, you're demonstrating against genocide, but you're not.
No.
So when you've got as a left that demonstrates against genocide, which is very, very small, let's say 10,000 at most, probably less. And you've got a left that is very happy to be ensconced within the Zionist bubble. I mean, right now, we had a letter by Air Force veterans, just saying that they are calling for an end to the fighting and an immediate hostage. And then the commander of the Air Force said that he will remove anyone who signed it and is still serving as a reservist. He will remove it from the ranks of reservists. And then they started negotiating. People who wrote the letter in Air Force Command started negotiating it, whether it will happen or not. That's not purposed. That's expressing an opinion. And again, it is constantly asserting the underlying notion that all of this is happening exclusively to Israel. That what is happening in Gaza is not Israel's responsibility. I hear the jets every night off to bomb in Gaza. People who live near there saying that they can't, that their houses shake for 6, 7, 8 hours straight. This is all happening now. And as far as most Israelis are concerned, it isn't, because it's not happening to real people.
And what about the recent, what is that? Is that an affair? This so-called Qatargate thing, where these protests started accusing Netanyahu of, I don't know what, not being a right patriot or something? Or
no, they accused him because it turns out the people who worked as his strategic consultants also worked for Qatar.
Okay.
And then orchestrated a PR campaign before the 2022 World Cup, meant to help sanitize Qatar's image around the world. Mm-hmm. What they're trying to insinuate is that, well, they can't insinuate much. And again, this goes to how bogus the whole complexity already is. This is very complex. Israel's relationship with Qatar is ambivalent and vague. They were our friends in the 90s. They're still our friends because they've helped us mediate with us. But they're also the patrons of the Muslim Brotherhood. So if you want to portray them as a terrorist, a state sponsor of terrorism, you can do that. But that's not necessarily the truth. So what I would point out to you and to your listeners is that Israelis always like to find somebody responsible for their predicament who's not them. So Netanyahu is not really Israeli. He was a foreign agent. Or the people who write for him were foreign agents.
Basically, Muslim Brotherhood in the end. Whatever. Maybe even Hamas themselves.
Protests are in the street suggesting Netanyahu is an anomaly. That his party, they don't represent the true Israel, but we represent the true Israel. And now we've got proof positive that he doesn't represent true Israel, because we can prove that his advisors were paid by Qatar. So what? All strategic consultants are paid by somebody. And again, it's not that Israel doesn't play these influence games. Of course it plays them. Just less successfully in Qatar because we've got less money and we're not as good at it. But we like this because it lets us pinpoint somebody who's not us. And one of the things people who protest fear the most is acknowledging that Netanyahu is actually a full-blooded Israeli. You want to present him as a man who's gone astray, who went crazy, who was acting out of purely personal interest, who doesn't care about the public. But that's not true, because Netanyahu is leading a government which is supported, at least as far as its greatest act, by a great majority of the Jewish population. And if there was an election held 6 months from now, if there was no decision in Netanyahu's trial, and people had to decide if they wanted to vote for Netanyahu or for epigons like Yair Golan or somebody else, I don't know that Netanyahu wouldn't win that election. As a lot of people would say, they're all saying the same thing. Why not vote for the original? Right? Because Netanyahu is the essence of Israeliness. His policy is the essence of Israeliness. We support this. We don't like it, but we support it. It's exactly the same with Netanyahu. We don't like him, but we might vote for him.
I mean, what I read a study this morning, a study or just a questionnaire that went around or something that said that 85% of the people in Israel, and I assume that would also include Palestinians in Israel, like Arabs in Israel, but 85% of them, they are on board with cleansing Gaza with basically the voluntary immigration thing. And 56 of them would even be willing to extend that to the Palestinians, to the Arabs living in Israel.
So, as you might assume, we don't poll Palestinian Israelis.
Are they not polled?
No.
Okay.
85% of the Jews.
All right.
And there are what? 3.5 billion Palestinian Israelis now? We don't poll them. They don't.
Okay. So that would be my second to last question, actually. Like, while they have this position towards the Palestinians in Gaza and in the West Bank about them not being there, not being a people, not being worth considering, how you said it, they don't see them. How does this translate towards their relation with those other Israelis that are 20%, I think, Arabs
in the north, where your family lives? A Jew may see Palestinians and hear Arabic spoken on a daily basis. My kids who live here will never hear Arabic. I see. Right? So for a lot of them, they're not really people. And in many ways, that's people, if they want to live here, and that is an act of generosity on our part, and they should be even more obedient than their non-citizen brethren in territories. And if not, screw that. A week does not go by where I don't get at least 1 or 2 messages on Messenger, which is the direct messaging service they appear to like, from Israeli Palestinians who say, "Thank you for writing what you're writing. You give us hope. We can't even like you, let alone be your friends. But just so we want you to know that we read you, and it's really important to us that you continue to write." I'm great, but that's not the point. The point is, the Palestinian Israelis, they already know they don't need Israeli soldiers to barge into their apartments every day and arrest them. They know they're watched fishing bit. They know they're under constant surveillance. They know they're treated as the enemy. They've always been treated as the enemy. So they police themselves. They don't talk. Except maybe express sympathy about Gaza. And then they're also often called out as traitors. So,
yeah, I had similar discussions. I'm gonna do another episode with a Palestinian activist here in Israel to speak about what their position has been, and also about the lack of at least visible demonstrations, protests against this. But yeah, you hinted at it, that of course they police themselves.
Yeah, that's the way the greatest dictatorships works. And you should never forget that up until the very moment when they collapse, dictatorships work. They are remarkably effective and very clear cut. It's very clear. You know what the rules are, even if you were a persecuted minority. And we have been honing our dictatorial skills for decades and decades. Probably on the backs of Palestinian Israelis, more than anybody else. Because it's one thing to have a violent occupation. Right? You live at the mercy of your occupiers. It's a whole other thing to live supposedly as an equal citizen, but effectively know exactly how the majority is looking at you, get on a bus or on a train. Or when you have to deal with the authorities,
Right.
Exactly what the authorities are doing and what they're saying.
Yeah, you want to build a house somewhere or something.
You want to build a house, you want to go abroad, you're set to be a report.
Right.
What are you doing? Where are you going? Your baggage is searched. You might get a cavity search if you're young and charismatic enough, or if you make a surly face in the security guard.
So maybe that's then the last point to get to. It's basically just a short question. Where do you think this is going?
A very short question. You could have talked about that for an hour and a half. I don't really know. I've been wrong several times during the past year and a half because I erred on the side of caution. I thought Israelis would realize. I thought Netanyahu would understand the political predicament. I thought the Israelis would come to their senses. They're not really coming to their senses. I think some kind of deal will be brokered out between Israel and Hamas for, I don't know, a month and a half. I don't think we will see Netanyahu toppled anytime soon. I think maybe we'll see some more international proceedings against Netanyahu, but I don't think they'll happen. I doubt the UN will sanction Israel. I think a lot of it has to do with the radicalness of Trump's measures, not with regard to Israel, but with regard to the international community. If Trump situates the United States against the international community, it will be easier for institutions like the EU to vocally criticize Israel. I understand that even the EU's High Commissioner for Foreign Affairs, Ms. Kallas from Estonia.
Lovely person.
I was very fortunate to spend 24 hours with her predecessor before he left office. He was a lovely person. He is a lovely person. He just could do it. Great guy. But she managed to say that what was happening in Gaza is unproportional sometimes. So I'm assuming that Israel will come to the realization that it has absolutely nothing to do with Gaza except kill Palestinians. I don't think we will see ethnic cleansing. I don't think we will see a forceful expulsion of Palestinians.
Why? Because it's not possible.
Yes, that's why. Not because nobody supports it, because it's not possible.
It's like logistically not feasible. Yeah, exactly.
To assume that Israel, which is really at its wit's end, has absolutely no money, and to assume that Israel would be able to set up machinery required to, as our Minister of Finance, Smotrich, said recently, process up to 10,000 people a day. That's the language he used. I don't see that.
Although there are people that want to run for Israel, of course. I mean, maybe even the majority of them.
I don't know if the majority of them are willing to actually do it. The majority of them want the Palestinians gone. It's not saying it's actually reported for duty. But I mean, look at what's happening now. The IDF chief of staff has basically told the government that it has to relinquish most of its ambitions about Gaza because there is a very concrete understanding in the military that if hundreds of thousands of Israelis are called up to invade Gaza once again, about 50% won't show up.
Well, okay.
Our national resilience is at an all-time low, despite the fact we support the genocide. We support it when it comes from above. There, the fighter planes are welcome to continue above. But we're not going to invade Gaza, which is what is needed to take Israel to the next step.
To get them out one by one, basically.
Either to get them out one by one or to control Gaza completely, imposing Israeli military law. And if that doesn't happen, then somebody will step into the vacuum. The only problem is that reaction time, which is usually slow for the international community, is even more egregiously slow because this is Israel. But I really do think that most Israelis don't understand how rapidly and how holistically Israel's international standing has completely crumbled. I think a lot of Israelis think, all right, they may be angry at us, but they understand.
A couple of years, something like this, yeah. Give them some time,
Give them some time. Exactly.
No.
I don't think that's what's going to happen at all. That's not the sense I get at all. And we fully deserve it. I don't know what I'm going to do abroad, except maybe make sure that my friends meet me in any country. To which
feel free to come to Berlin. We'll meet you.
Well, Berlin is, I think, a fairly safe place for Israelis. But if I go to Ireland, which is a country I like very much, I will need some Irish French to sit with me and make sure nobody spits in my coffee. But even that, you know what? I will bear the punishment because I feel like we deserve it. And I am part of the collective. Again, I get a lot of reprimands from my leftist friends who say, when I write in Hebrew, I write Twitter evaluation on Facebook. I use the first person plural.
Which you did today too, yeah.
Yeah, I got
But our did and we.
about us. Because I think I'm a part of us. The fact that I'm critical doesn't mean I'm not a part of it. I was born and raised in this. The reason I understand this or cannot think about anything but this has a lot to do with the fact that I am a part of the collective. I'm not some universal citizen. There are a lot of people who say the real solution to this problem is to have a universal secular state here based on general human rights. There isn't a single country in the world that's based on secular universal human rights. I'm a Jew. I was born here. I take my Jewishness seriously. I want to be a Jew and I want to live here. The way things are at the moment, I live here, but I'm not going to condone this. Even through staying silent, I will speak. If somebody doesn't like it, they can do something about it, but I don't get a sense that I'm in any danger.
Yeah, let's hope that stays this way. Ori, thanks a lot.
My pleasure.
And hope to have you back. Maybe we can have some remote calls when you're like in Berlin.
Whatever.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks. And then thanks for everybody listening and see you soon.
Leute, wir brauchen eure Hilfe. Wenn euch dieses Video gefallen hat, klickt auf Like, abonniert den Kanal und vergesst nicht das Glöckchen zu drücken, damit ihr benachrichtigt werdet, wenn wir neuen Content droppen.
Außerdem solltet ihr uns überall folgen, wo wir verfügbar sind. Das ist Facebook, Instagram, Twitter und Twitch. Und wenn wir irgendwelche Ankündigungen machen oder Posts, dann shared, was das Zeug hält. Gebt uns all eure Liebe.
Wir haben mittlerweile ziemlich signifikante Kosten. Wenn ihr es euch irgendwie leisten könnt, unterstützt uns doch auf Patreon. Dann kommt ihr auch in den Genuss verschiedener Vorteile, wie zum Beispiel Zugang zu unserer Discord-Community oder Zugang zu den ultra-geheimen Patreon-Episoden, die wir dort posten. Außerdem könnt ihr uns natürlich auch über PayPal Spenden zukommen lassen.
Außerdem haben wir mittlerweile einen eigenen Online-Shop. Das heißt, wenn ihr euch immer noch fragt, was ihr euren Lieben zu Weihnachten, Ostern oder sonst wie schenken könnt, geht dorthin und kauft duftes Merch.
Alle Links dazu hier in der Beschreibung oder auch auf unserer Webseite 99zu1.de.
Vielen Dank fürs Dabeisein, danke für die Unterstützung und wir sehen uns in diesem Theater.